Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday's Talks. This is an initiative of Montenegro Art Project, and today we are talking with Laura Renée Maier. But before I introduce Laura, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Liliana Becerra. I'm a design strategist and co-curator of our new show titled Silent Threads, which is open right now, and we hope you will have a chance to visit. And I'm going to be interviewing one of the artists for the exhibition. Her name is Laura Renée. Welcome, Laura.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. So, Laura has been an inspiration for the show because of her work. We started to conceive this show with Sandra, thinking about Laura's work actually, and how her pieces could be a connected thread throughout the whole exhibition. So, Laura is originally from Seattle, Washington. She developed a fascination with textiles and a collection of antique sewing machines at a young age. In 2014, she unearthed her signature style and began creating and showing her first bodies of work. Laura is currently based between New York City and Bogota, Colombia. Her work is part of international collections, and she's currently collaborating with the French furnishing company Rouge Bois. Laura Renée is a textile artist with focus on stylistic renderings of the female form, stitching into fabric by way of antique sewing machine. She creates intimate figures using only one continuous line. This one line represents the infinite and perpetually unraveling nature of ourselves. Her works translate the undefinable feelings of femininity into fibers to stand the test of time. So I'm going to start asking Laura some questions now. When I first knew or met you or saw your work, I fell in love with one piece titled Inmolarse, which means in English to sacrifice oneself or to give oneself up. I was captivated by the power of the medium you utilize, which mixes sewing and embroidering on canvas, and also has use of acrylic and gold leaf foil. After further reading about the piece, I fell in love with it, therefore I purchased it, but I learned that it was made with a hand-operating sewing machine. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why this piece is important in the process of developing your signature style or your artistic style, and why do you consider the action of using a hand-operating sewing machine as an artistic medium?
Yes, so this piece in Molarse was very special to me, very special to you, and to a lot of people actually. That whole series was titled Incarnations, and from that series, as far as style, I think more than any specific style, I learned more that my work can have a real impact emotionally on people, like you and like so many people. Not only like was it had nothing to do with me like creating a beautiful thesis around the work or technique or anything behind that. Like it was about the emotional impact and the most emotional connection. So from this series, I learned what power my work can have, and that beyond technique, beyond anything learned or inherent, it was really kind of an act of making magic, an act of transmuting my experience into something that was unrelated to me but had such a profound impact on the viewer. It's in a way kind of like alchemy, like magic in some way. And from that point in that series, that became something that I really strove for and looked for in my pieces, is that emotional impact, that like almost like a triggering of a memory somewhere in the back of your mind that you forgot about it, like a feeling, and so that's what I learned from that series and from that piece specifically. It was very important. And as far as my machine, the second part of that question, my machine is a really important part of my whole work. My work more than anything is like a meditation on time, and my machine is an antique singer, and so it's a relic of time. It's 100 years old, and I love this thing because back when it was made, it revolutionized the act of sewing, which is something so ancient, and it made it something like people could do fast, that people could change the way they live their lives. But now, as it exists, it's like something super archaic. Some people would be like, why in the world would you spend all of your time using this machine going one stitch at a time? But I really love the idea of like an intentional disruption of time and regaining that control of like how you perceive time and really spending time in that negative space, in that elongated period. And I like to think all of my pieces, like you said, are one continuous line. So it's also like when you're stitching, it's like a line, right? It's one point to another point. But with my work, it curves and it intersects and it becomes three-dimensional, it becomes wavy, which I think is really how time exists. It's something three-dimensional, it goes in different directions and intersects with other timelines. And it's never something flat or something stagnant, it's something that's moving and adapting. And yes.
Definitely, I think time is something that when one looks at your work, you can feel time. I think.
Yes.
It's like time is kind of suspended somehow.
Yeah, and that's absolutely how I feel when I'm making it. Like, people always ask me how long it takes. I'm like, okay, like I have to think about it. I have to like look at timestamps on photos because in the process I get completely lost, and I think maybe that's why I enjoy it so much, because like I can, in that part of my life, I can disrupt time, and it kind of doesn't exist in a way which is kind of freeing, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, the artworks that we selected for our exhibition, titled Silent Threads, came from two of your series. One is titled Flesh of My Flesh, and the other one is titled Disappearances. For Flesh of My Flesh, we are showcasing the piece titled Eternal from One Woman, which was created with red thread on canvas. So tell us a little bit about the process in which this piece and this story slowly emerge. We're telling something about this female form emerging from the canvas in a specific way. Tell us a little bit about that.
This series, Carne, is inspired by actually a concept in biology that I stumbled across. It's called Evo-Devo, or evolutionary developmental biology. And the theme behind this sect of biology is that all living creatures come from the same kind of set of genes. And if you look closely at every form, the same patterns, the same structures exist in every form. And I thought that was so beautiful. The name of the book is called Endless Forms Most Beautiful, which is like a beautiful name. And so I kind of fell in love with this idea, and I started looking at like plants and trees and then our bodies and seeing like how these structures are the same. Like, and then when I came to Colombia, I saw these yorumos, and I was like fascinated by them because they looked like alive. They looked like animals almost. And so I started this series comparing the natural bodies and the feminine body, and it became very visceral. With the red thread, it was almost like pulling back the skin of ourselves and comparing with the natural world around us, which is really beautiful and also very confrontational, because also from that exploration came this realization of the also parallel story of abuse of women and the environment. you know, like from the environment, we rape and we take the resources and we give no regard for how much we take or like what it needs in return. And I feel like as women, that's also an experience that we relate to a lot as well. So that red woman, she speaks that story a lot. Like she's in quite a lot of pain, but it's also just kind of all out there, you know, to see. And the other beautiful thing about that piece specifically was it's also very much a meditation for me and like letting go, because when I originally started that piece, it was like very proportionate, perfect. I think it was probably like 10 or 15 centimeters taller. But the beautiful thing about fabric is it's an organic material. It changes and it kind of adapts the way nature does. So the act of sewing is actually quite violent. Like it's puncturing over and over and over again with the needle. And through that violence, through that act, the fabric mutates and changes and kind of moves the way it wants. So through that piece, you know, the shoulder would kind of come down or the arm would be elongated. It was kind of an act of adaptation on my end as well to move with that piece. And the way it came out was really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I think in your artworks, one thing that fascinates me is that you start with 2 dimensions. You start flat and a flat thread. But as you sort of like soften it, as you create the visual of it, a 3-dimensional forms, and it's an actual space that is created, and it's like a representation of an actual person in there.
Yeah,
so it becomes alive.
Definitely.
Because of the way the textile kind of curves and creates paths. It's quite beautiful.
Yeah, it definitely. I struggle with presenting my work through photos or digitally because in person it has this movement, it has this like aliveness to it, and that's not really. I don't really take credit for that. I think that it's just the material. I think that it's just something organic happening, which I really love. And also, yes, it's like what we spoke about time and that it's not predictable. And some pieces, like the Disappearances other piece that's downstairs, that one is quite flat. Like that one didn't really have much to say as far as texture, and that just happens. I don't change the process, I don't change the materials. Just whatever spirit kind of comes alive in that one. So especially for that Red Woman piece, it had a lot. It had a lot to hold on to.
Yes, it shows. Okay. So for the other series that we're showcasing in our exhibition, we have Disappearances 4, which is embroidered with black thread instead of red thread on canvas. And besides that, we also have 3 digital artworks in the format of NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens. So they are also called Disappearances 2, Disappearances 3, and Agustin's Hands, or Las Manos de Agustin. So you have this combination of very physical work, and now you're doing 2-dimensional work. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this series, Disappearances or Desapariciones, and how did you get the inspiration for it? How the embroidered pieces connect with the digital pieces as a story?
Yeah, this series has been inspired by my time here in Colombia. It is still a bit. I'm still working on the series, so it still feels like a bit raw and like a bit open emotionally. And it actually wasn't really until I saw the piece hanging downstairs I was kind of able to like look at it and like sit with like really what it means, because I've been sitting with this idea of the disappearances happening here that have happened here in Colombia, and that's been really, really strong for me.
And your pieces are quite strong.
Yeah, they're
what comes out of it.
Yeah, and it kind of came from this, like, trying to like find my identity and home here in Colombia because, you know, I came here, I started making work, being inspired, but it's also like coming to terms with this other like dark side of the Colombian identity, you know, and like also this was happening during the pandemic when so many people's lives were being lost, like all the time on the TV you're seeing like, you know, 5,000 people died today, and then also meanwhile here in Colombia at the same time there's like hundreds of people just like going missing, and like it's very like a strong thing to like come to terms with, and I think we're all like feeling that, of course. So I was thinking a lot about like what that word means, like what does it mean to disappear, like what does it mean like when someone like leaves us, what do we leave behind, like metaphysically and physically, you know, our particles are constantly entangled with the energies of everyone around us. So parts of us we leave behind physically and emotionally. And also thinking about like when we lose parts of ourselves, like through trauma or, you know, losing someone or even just moving on in life, you know, that was the kind of the theme of it. It's very, very heavy, and these pieces speak to that. And a lot of them are like, actually all of them, are like a disconnection between the head and body. And yeah, that's I think that speaks to like the difference of the where is the spirit, where is the identity? Is it in the head, or is it in the physical body? Is it in the mind? And yes, all of these pieces have kind of some like hanging threads or some like disappearing sort of
some incompleteness.
Incompleteness. That's the perfect way to say it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this series has been very challenging for me, but also like very beautiful. And with the NFTs, it's been the NFT experience has been quite new to me. But I was mostly like very pleasantly surprised that I could take like this very abstract, very like emotional concept that I was working on with my physical works and just attempt to do it digitally and have that feeling translate so seamlessly. That was something beautiful. Yes, and what was the other part of that question?
It was how do you connect the embroidered pieces with the digital pieces, because it's the same series, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So do you feel that they connect in a visual way only, or do you feel like, how do you see it being a part of the same?
Yeah, they definitely feel like the same series. This is the first time I've ever done like such different medias within the same series. Mostly the digital started out as an experimentation. Because I was super curious about NFTs, I was super curious about this like new market, this new opportunity, and in my opinion, the NFT space is not really quite at the point where like my physical works I could really represent my physical works there. Especially like, you know, how I said that the photos and representing the textiles digitally is quite challenging. So I wanted to try something new. I wanted to just like put my foot in, see like what happened in a way that wasn't so labor intensive and didn't take so much time. And yeah, it just happened like really beautifully and serendipitously, and like yes, I find them in the same series, but it's almost like they're two different worlds in a way. Like my textile works and the market for those are completely different than the NFT market right now. So it's nice to have that diversity with this collection.
Definitely. It's very refreshing to see an artist that is able to navigate both.
Yes. Yeah, it was definitely like a experimentation, and it worked out. And it's been super inspiring because I'm not a techie person at all. I don't know anything about technology. I just got my iPad Pro and the pencil, and it's just so amazing what this technology can do, because it's literally like an extension of your body. It feels like you're using natural materials, and like that was really surprising, and it kind of reawoke this like love for painting in me. So I'm going to start exploring like physical painting as well in my work is with the textiles as well.
Excellent. Okay. So we noticed that currently we're seeing a growing appreciation for the handmade in general in the world, and the artwork that uses materiality of the medium as a central element. So we are curious to know how long does it take you to conceive an artwork that is, and how is the process itself? Do you first draw a sketch on paper and then making it in the sewing machine, or are you sketching directly embroidered pieces? Because we saw some of your studies. So tell us a little bit about the beginning of the process of creation.
Yes. I've always been really bad at planning things ahead. I always try to do little sketches, but it never really works out. I just get frustrated because I can't quite see it in the sketches. So most pieces I usually just start drawing directly on the fabric.
Drawing with pencil.
With pencil, yeah. Which can sometimes be problematic because if I totally mess something up, it's really hard to get it out and sometimes I have to start over again. But I just like to kind of dive in, so I just go straight to the fabric. I use a pencil, but I usually only do kind of the outline. I just get where the eyes, I get all the proportions in place. I'll spend quite a lot of time on the face and the hands just to get all those details right, but then I am always very eager to get out of the sketching process because it's very frustrating for me, because I get the tendency to be a perfectionist. I want to change everything, but it's kind of pointless with my work because that always changes. Like we were talking about with the Red Woman, it changes completely. So I just have to get the ideas there and then get out of that and get to the stitching, because that's for me the real work. It's the process, it's the meditation. Things change in that process all the time. And it's like navigating through a labyrinth in a way. One part of the body to the next, finding ways roads and yes, that's the most rewarding part of the work, is the actual physical stitching.
And are you often satisfied with the end result, or does it happen to you that you absolutely don't like it, you want to start over?
Yeah, at the end it's kind of I think probably most artists can relate to this. It's a really strange feeling, kind of conflicting. Especially when you spend so much time on a piece, you really have to just not look at it. Sometimes pieces that are very emotionally involved for me, I can't look at them for months because you just hate it. Because also it's in a lot of ways a reflection of those parts of you maybe that you're not really quite ready to look at so clearly. But in the end, I always feel very grateful to the piece and the way it came out, and also grateful for the process that it always becomes something that I didn't expect. No matter how much I try to control it or try to expect something from it, it is always different in a way that's very liberating. It's its own soul in a way.
And how long? I know you mentioned the time, you lose a sense of time, but can you give us an idea of how long does it take you to elaborate?
Yeah.
Or do you completely just lose there?
No, I mean, I have to know, otherwise, I would never get anything done. No, it takes, on average, a piece takes about 3 months to make. Sometimes it just flows really easy, and I get it done in 3 weeks. That's happened twice, but it usually takes several months of work. And I mean, if you can look closely at the pieces, you can see every stitch and every place where it's dark. It's stitched over 10 or 20 times. So it's these are roads almost. I have to follow the same line back to get to this place, and also physically it's quite intense. It's this motion constantly, and you have to take breaks, and sometimes it makes your eyes bug out, and
because it's so
it's super detailed, and sometimes I'll find myself hunched over Quasimodo. But it's it's a very interesting process that I have to learn how how to manage my time and how to like take care of my mental and physical health in the process. But yes, it takes several months to make one piece, and the Red Woman took about 3.5 to do. And that's like, that's working every day. So.
Every day, all day.
And the other, like, not so glamorous part of my work is that a lot of the time I have to take out stitches, like, that I messed up, and that's, like, a very time-consuming process as well, and I have to be very careful because part of my whole, like, theory behind my work is it's one line, so whatever section I take out, I have to make sure that I start at the same, like, thread where I ended taking the stitches out. So, yes, there's a lot of, like, tedious moments, and a lot of moments where I feel like screaming, but it's like, it's also, like, that's kind of creation. It's kind of, like, visceral. It's kind of, like, giving birth in a way. Like, it's very painful, and but that's what gives the piece its own life. It's that emotion.
So I was talking earlier about this trend of materiality, and now we're seeing also an emergence of digital art through NFTs. So you have recently started to work on this digital format as well. We already talked a little bit about it. But what made you actually start working on digital format? What was the thing that triggered you and said, I'm going to start doing digital as well? Because it's a very radical change.
Super radical.
Yeah.
No, I've never ever considered digital art. I've always loved it. I loved other digital artists. Like I said, I'm not like technical. I literally just learned how to use this iPad. But I got into it because of the idea of NFTs, and I got into NFTs just from exploring the crypto space and getting really into the idea of the potentials of the blockchain technology and what it can do, and discovering NFTs and discovering what that can do for artists, and it was super exciting. And then also just exploring it and seeing the amazing market that is available for artists there. So we touched on this before, but I was like a little bit hesitant to just throw my textile works in there, just like put photos and try to see how that would work. And also at the same time, if I minted one of my physical pieces, there's still kind of a disconnect in that NFT world. Like, what happens to a physical piece when it becomes an NFT? The same way there's like a disconnect when people are like, what happens to an NFT if you want to make it physical? That's kind of a gray area right now. So I decided to just try digital and see if my style could translate, see if I could like figure it out. And I'm still figuring it out. But it's like a space that's growing like crazy. The technology is growing. There's more and more platforms like Christie's and Sotheby's are having these massive auctions, and I think it's like YQ or one of these, and like Urs Fisher or Damien Hirst,
everyone's jumping.
They're trying to get into it because it's like it's the future, and it's really beautiful because once I think all the kinks are ironed out, like it's going to be revolutionary for artists. Like so much of the art market is very corrupt. There is a lot of taking advantage of artists, especially unrecognized artists, and marking their work up and taking huge gains. So this would allow for artists to be in control of their work for their lifetime. They would always get royalties back. Their artwork would always be connected to their name, to their identity. They would be able to manage their careers and their wealth in a new way, which is really exciting. And and I just really believe in this idea. And like I'm still very, very new to this space, and I think, this space in general is still very new. But I'm really excited to see what comes of it. And I have a lot of ideas that I'm working on actually in incorporating the physical reality and this digital reality. I'm actually working on a project with a cryptographer. We're working on the idea of embedding the private key, the physical identity on the blockchain into the physical work. and experimentation with that. So in a way, the physical item becomes the digital identity in a way, which is like very hard to understand, but it's I think it's going to be really interesting once you figure it out, and I think there's amazing opportunities for artists.
Absolutely, yes, very interesting for sure. So, what? Well, in part you have already responded somehow, but what do the NFTs allow you to do that the sewing machine doesn't allow you to do, and vice versa? But now you're talking already about merging, maybe trying to.
That's something that I'm still trying to figure out, because, like I said, I was really surprised and happy to see how my style was able to translate into this new medium, and my technique, and that visually it was something beautiful and powerful. But at this point, I don't think that my digital pieces hold the physical emotion, because there's this idea in quantum physics that I think about a lot called entanglement, and it's where energy is physical matter, and our energy gets physically entangled with other energies around us. Like they separated two particles energetically, put them across the world, and they like tried to do something to one particle on the other side of the world. This other particle responded in the same way, and it's like how we exist as humans. Like we feel the emotions of other people, we feel the presence of other people, we feel those things because it's physical. It's not something that I think has necessarily been able to measure quite yet in science, but it's on its way. But that's how I feel about my physical pieces. I feel like they hold physically my energy, they hold that emotion, and like the viewer can feel that because the viewer has that perception of energy as well. And digitally, they do hold part of me, but not in the way that something that I've been holding and touching for months holds that humanity, you know.
Yes.
So that's why I'm kind of exploring this. How do you translate the physical and the digital? Because the NFTs, the blockchain, this technology, that's the future, and that's super exciting. And I want to figure out how to merge these two things together. So that's where my mind is now. I'll let you know when I figure it out.
Yeah. Okay. How did you decide to come and live in Colombia? How do you like being here? Tell us a little bit about that.
No, I've never expected to live in Colombia or come here. I was working in Mexico. I have some really good friends that live there. They were opening a gallery space and wanted me to be there. And I was really tired of being in New York. I was working in restaurants. I was like not able to really fully pursue my artwork. So I moved to Mexico and I was working there for quite a while, and had this amazing studio. That's where I created your piece, in which was like very colorful, very like magical, and when I was there, I stumbled across my partner. He's a designer, and we started mutually following each other, admiring each other's work. We started talking about doing a collaborative wearable art collection, which is another project that I'm also working on. I've done in the past, so we wanted to kind of explore this idea in a new way, especially like black tones. So we're talking a lot about this, getting really excited, and then so then he came to Mexico for work, and I met him, and then we fell in love, and then my kind of driving force in all my decisions in life is kind of just to follow the inspiration and not really know where to go, so I followed that here, and I'm still here because inspiration is still here. So.
Oh, that is really beautiful. Okay. You mentioned a little bit about partnerships. So can you tell us a little bit about the partnership of Rouge Boudoir? How did it start, and how did the partnership develop, and how did you decide to create designs for furniture?
Yeah. So I'm working on another collection with a Mexican designer. Her name is Renée Maier. We came with this idea to do a collection of wearable art pieces, kind of in the theme of haute couture, but more like artistic, contemporary. This idea we birthed like 4 years ago. It's still in the process, but the driving force behind the idea was to create this collection and auction it, and for it to go to a nonprofit, to a charity. The one we're working with is called Fondo Semillas, based in Mexico, which is an amazing, amazing organization. So we've been working on this project for quite a while, and it's kind of taken like some turns. And we were fortunate to meet some of the executives of the Rich Bourgeois in New York, and we were telling about the project, and they fell in love with it. They saw the pieces, so we ended up commissioning or doing a collaboration of 2 chairs. It's called the Hortons chairs. And is what their chair is called. And we did 2 of those, and they were so beautiful. And we ended up doing an event around that with the chairs and also with the pieces. And the people from Rush Bourgeois loved it so much. They loved like people's reaction, how people they got really excited. So they got even more excited about the project. So they decided to like sponsor our whole runway, our whole auction, the project entirely, and we're gonna do some more pieces with them actually.
That's wonderful.
But then like the pandemic started, so everything has been on pause, and so we're waiting to see kind of how that goes. But it was a really cool experimentation because, like we talked about before, like my pieces are very textural. I've always seen them as sculptures in a way. Like I've never seen them as something flat. So it was really cool to see them as physical objects, you know. Those chairs are quite cool because it's like on one side it's the faces, on the other side it's the hands, so it's like almost like the body kind of reimagined in this chair, which is something that we entangle our energies with every day.
You have a very strong connection with the body and
Yes.
the hands, especially and the female body as well.
Yes.
The reason for that?
I don't know the reason. I think it's just always been the most like I think the female body is just like so beautiful, and especially hands have always been something like the most expressive thing. When I was young, I fell in love with the works of Ivan Chile, and like the way he drew hands and women was like so radical and like very dark, and I related to that a lot. No, but I mean the artworks that I've always really identified with are always figurative works.
So the last question is, what plans do you have for the future? You already talked a little bit about the partnerships, but what other things do you have in mind? Like, people probably are wondering, what are you going to do? Or
Yeah, well, I mean, in the immediate future, I have a hard time thinking very far ahead, but in the immediate future, I want to continue this Disappearances series because, like I said, it's still very like raw. It doesn't feel like a book that's closed yet. I want to do a lot of really large form pieces. I have this like dream of having like a massive like mural that's like divided into panels. That's not solely figurative, but also like landscape, other elements, like a bit surrealist. And also this idea of this convergence between the digital and the physical world, and this idea of the creating the physical NFTs is super exciting to me. And I just want to keep developing my work and making something that people can like really relate to. Like, you know, I feel like in a way, every piece kind of has like that person that has a connection to it, like you did, had that piece. So I want to just keep making pieces and having more people come and feel something, you know?
definitely, yes. Okay. Are we gonna do any questions?
Yes, we have some questions. So,
Do you wanna read the question?
yes, I might read the question. So, Daniela is asking, when and how did you realize the close relationship between human and plant anatomy, so present in your work?
Yeah. I think that's a relationship that I've had like very personally since I was very young. I grew up like my family were very outdoorsy. We were always like camping. We were always in the forest. Where I come from, Seattle, it's like in the mountains and the trees and water. It's like so beautiful. So that relationship with nature has been like a huge part of me always. And I think it wasn't until recently when I found this book called Endless Forms Most Beautiful. It's by Sean Carroll, that I started to think about the science behind this idea that we are really all the same forms, and just really we're separated by time and space. The time and space and activation of different parts of that DNA is created you, and then created like that Yodomochi, and that's like, it maybe seems like overly simplistic, but I think it's very poetic and really beautiful, and it's kind of like gives you a bit of meaning in a way. Maybe you'll come back in your next life and you'll be a tree, because we're made of all the same stuff, and I think that's super beautiful.
Okay. Next question is, this is in Spanish. ¿Cómo comenzó tu trayectoria como artista? ¿Siempre fue con máquina de coser?
Yes. I've never studied formally art. I've always taken figurative classes. I was originally doing charcoal, doing a lot of painting, which I still really love. The textile came about 7 or 8 years ago. When I found this machine, basically, I just started experimenting with it. I've always had a really attachment to textiles. I grew up sewing, making a lot of my own clothes, and so it just kind of felt like a natural progression. I was like, okay, I can use this thing, and it was really cool because it's a hand crank. So it's a very intimate act. It's almost like an extension of my body, and it felt like drawing. So I started with very, very simple, like line drawing faces, and then it developed in more and more, and it hasn't gotten boring yet, and I keep finding like new things to do. And yeah, I think it'll always be the like main staple of my work.
Okay, interesting. Let's see. Do you like living in Colombia? What do you like the most? Okay, so do you like living in Colombia?
Yes. The most, I love the nature. Like I said, that's something very important to me. So whenever I can get out of Bogota, and Colombia is just so rich in wildlife and like plants and animals that you would never see anywhere else in the world. And it's like, it kind of feels like the Garden of Eden in that way. Like there's just everything, and we'll go on a hike, and I'll just like pick up a leaf and just like, wow, it's just super, so beautiful. And I love the richness of Colombia. It's stunning.
Okay. And what do you like the least?
The least would be the air pollution in Bogota and the noise.
It's quite strong,
yeah,
right?
it's kind of like, and it's like Bogota is a bit hectic. A bit. But no, besides that, I love everything.
Okay. We have a question. Muros Blancos is asking you, why did you choose opposite media on your work, the very analog and the digital world?
Yeah, well, that's kind of like what we talked about a little bit. At first, it started out as an experimentation, trying to explore this new world of NFTs, this new medium. And then it became kind of an extension of my work. It became a place where I could maybe take some elements that I couldn't express in my textiles with color, kind of brush texture, and give it a life in a way that maybe wasn't so time-consuming. It felt more easy, more like free in a way. There wasn't so much personal pressure on my end. And also, it's really nice because my machine is like 15 kilos. It's like really heavy, and so it's not exactly something I can like take on the go, or like if I'm somewhere else traveling, I can't work. So having this new medium was like very liberating because I could still practice my figurative work. I could still do things without carrying this huge thing with me. So.
Okay. And we have a question. Ivano Talora wants to know, does the precision of the human body have any meaning in your work?
Yeah, actually that's a question I get quite a lot. I don't know if there's any intentional meaning. It's been a kind of maybe just like a human way of taking something big, taking something that is maybe a little bit hard to understand and breaking it down into smaller pieces, making it down and really appreciating the shape and the curves of each one of those pieces and how they fit together to create this like form. And every time I have a figurative piece, the form breaks down in a different way. The shapes are different, and it's kind of like a puzzle and exploration because those shapes come into form during the stitching process. I don't do them at all when I'm sketching, and so they just kind of come more organically. And I think it's just an interesting way to like break things down and be able to see them in a different way.
Okay. We have a question from Valerie. She tells you that she's 11 years old and she wants to know, does your artwork mean something?
Yes, my artwork means whatever the person viewing, like you, whatever you feel. I like have a hard time with the idea of making big concepts behind work, making like postulating about what this is supposed to mean or what I'm saying, but I think in the end, like we just have an emotional connection to artwork, to music, to like being here together. So it's whatever you feel, whatever it means, and usually I find it like triggers a memory. So whatever it reminds you of, whatever like maybe something from an experience you had when you were a kid, or maybe you're seeing something into the future. Yes, it's just an emotion, it's a feeling.
Okay.
Something that you can't really describe.
Okay. We have an audience today. I don't know if you have any questions for Laura.
I do.
Okay.
Do you feel like the experience of being a woman in America and then in Latin America, here in Bogota, in general, like being a woman, do you feel like it translates to your work and the sewing process and like the emotion that you see that one can feel when we see your pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my work is very much like an expression of that feminine experience, that like the way we relate to the world, the way what we feel, our sensitivity, and I've always been incredibly inspired by women, and also the act of sewing itself is attributed to women. It's attributed to craft. It's like sometimes not taken seriously as artwork, and I think that's also very parallel to our experience as women. What we put out in the world sometimes is not always taken seriously. And yeah, no, I think my work is extremely feminine, and as far as the differences between living in the U.S. and in Latin America, I think they're quite the same. I think it's quite parallel. I think it's the same story. I think maybe it's just like a bit more hidden and put under the rug in the U.S. But I think we're all like living the same story. And I think there needs to be more women artists. The Guggenheim and the Met need to represent more women artists because like I think we have like the most to say.
Anyone else? Okay, so we have one last question. Daniela is asking, have you ever worked with indigenous Colombian people? Have you learned anything from their traditional techniques?
That has been a huge dream of mine. Like I mentioned earlier, I arrived here in Colombia and I've been was there for about 6 months before the pandemic started and everything locked down. So all of my dreams of traveling and learning have been put on hold. But I really love the idea of the cookies with the mochilas. They use a lot of these like same concepts that I think about. They attach like this idea of infinity and the idea of their ancestors and that knowledge like coming through them into their work, and I think that is so beautiful. And I would really, really love to explore Colombia, learn more, and also explore like new fibers and new materials. I know in the Amazon there is a fiber made from the tree trunks that like looks amazing. I would love to do a piece of that. So I think there's so much here to learn as far as textiles, and I'm like so happy that I ended up here. And I really want to like also be able to like bring that to the rest of the world, because I don't think that much of the world really knows how much is here. Yes.
Okay. So that's it.
Okay, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for spending time with me, listening to me. It means a lot. So thank you all.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Liliana, for joining us today. Next week, we are going to have a talk with Nicole Maza. She's another artist from the exhibition Silent Threads. So thank you all for joining us, and I hope we will see you next week.
And thank you, Anna. Thank you, Sandra, for putting this together. It was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Bye. Ciao.